More than 2,000 meters, over 6,000 feet below the surface of the ocean, in complete darkness, the largest toothed predator that has ever lived is hunting. The sperm whale fires sound into the dark, clicks so powerful they are the loudest noise produced by any animal on Earth, and waits for the echo to return. It is searching for something that does not want to be found, something with eyes the size of a basketball, something that fights back hard enough to leave scars that last for decades on the skin of an animal that can weigh up to 45 tons. The sperm whale is the apex predator of the deep ocean, or so the story goes, because even the sperm whale changes its behavior when something else enters the area. Great white sharks, the most feared predator in the shallower ocean, have predators. The animals that hunt them have been documented. Entire food chains, once assumed to end at a certain level, have since been revised as new evidence surfaced from deeper water. And every revision points in the same direction. The ocean does not appear to have a ceiling. More than 80% of the ocean floor has never been directly observed. The catalog of marine life is not finished, and somewhere in the parts of the ocean we have barely reached, the question of what actually sits at the top of the food chain remains genuinely, uncomfortably open. Tonight, we climb that chain, level by level, and find out how far up it actually goes. Every living thing in the ocean occupies a place that was shaped by its last meal. That place is called a trophic level, although the idea itself is much simpler than the name suggests. The smallest drifting phytoplankton form the first level because they create their own energy from sunlight. Tiny animals that feed upon those phytoplankton become the second level. Fish that consume those tiny animals rise to the third. Each step upward is defined not by size or strength, but by what an animal must eat to remain alive. This arrangement carries a cost that cannot be avoided. With every transfer from one level to the next, most of the available energy disappears into movement, growth, warmth, and the countless ordinary processes of life. Only about 10% continues upward. Imagine 1,000 kilograms of phytoplankton drifting beneath the surface. That immense living harvest can ultimately support only about 1 kilogram of predator at the highest reaches of the chain. Every hunter depends upon a vast foundation beneath it, whether that foundation is visible or not. On land, this gradual loss of energy places a firm ceiling on the food chain. Predators roam across forests, grasslands, deserts, or mountains, sharing the same broad surface with the animals they pursue. Eventually, the available energy becomes too little to support another hunter above the last one. The chain narrows until it reaches its upper limit, held in place by the mathematics of survival itself. The ocean follows the same physical rule, yet it arranges life in a completely different shape. Instead of spreading across a landscape, it extends through an immense column of water reaching nearly 11 kilometers, that is nearly 7 miles, from the surface to the deepest trenches. A predator ruling one layer may never encounter the creatures living far below it. An animal occupying the highest position in shallow coastal water can become prey after descending into another depth, where an entirely different community has evolved under conditions it has never experienced. The chain does not simply stretch across distance, it descends through depth, becoming another world again and again. Most of that world remains far below sunlight. Roughly 90% of the ocean lies deeper than 200 meters, which is about 656 feet. Beyond that boundary, daylight fades away, pressure rises relentlessly, and the water settles near freezing, often around 4 degrees Celsius or 39 degrees Fahrenheit. This vast region is not a remote edge of the sea. It is the sea itself, occupying almost all of the planet's living ocean by volume. Yet nearly everything people first learned about marine food webs came from the narrow layer above it. Boats skimmed the surface, divers reached only modest depths, nets sampled what could be lifted back into daylight. Instruments built by human hands endured only so much pressure before their limits were reached. Generation after generation, the map of ocean predation grew from observations gathered within the upper portion of an environment whose greatest dimensions remained beyond direct reach. As exploration gradually pressed farther downward, every expansion of the sample revealed new relationships that had existed all along. The chain proved longer than the model, darker than the map, and its highest point shifted each time the boundaries of observation reached a little farther into the living depths. For much of the 20th century, the structure of the ocean's food chain appeared settled. Textbooks, university lectures, fisheries policies, and ecosystem models all rested upon the same understanding. Marine food webs were believed to rise through 6 trophic levels before reaching their highest predators. The number was treated not as a temporary estimate, but as a dependable description of how energy moved through the sea. It became part of the foundation upon which decades of scientific work and environmental management were built. That conclusion did not emerge from poor science, it emerged from limited reach. Researchers described the ocean using the evidence they could collect, and for generations that evidence came from waters that were comparatively accessible. The picture was carefully assembled, yet many of its pieces originated from only a small fraction of the environment they sought to explain. As observations expanded, the framework remained, even while the ocean beyond it continued to hold relationships that had not yet entered the record. A turning point arrived in 2014 when a broad analysis published in the journal Ecology Letters revisited one of the most dependable clues preserved inside living animals themselves. Nitrogen isotope ratios act like a long record of an animal's diet. Every meal leaves a chemical trace that becomes incorporated into muscle and other tissues, creating a gradual history of feeding that cannot be erased by a single recent hunt. Instead of relying only on stomach contents or direct observation, researchers could examine the chemistry carried within the bodies of marine predators and reconstruct the position they occupied in the food web over much longer periods. The results revealed a pattern that repeated across many different species. Predators already regarded as occupying the highest positions consistently measured higher than expected. The discrepancy did not arise because the animals had changed. It came from a long-accepted assumption about how nitrogen isotope values shift between one trophic level and the next. That assumption proved to underestimate the movement through the food chain. Once the calculation was corrected, familiar predators climbed noticeably higher within the revised model. Large sharks, killer whales, and the great-toothed whales all occupied positions beyond the values traditionally assigned to them. The familiar summit had not disappeared, yet it had moved upward. The correction did not create new predators. It revealed that the old measuring stick had been shorter than the system it attempted to measure. Among the most remarkable results were those from Greenland sharks living in the Canadian Arctic. Their measured trophic positions extended from about 4 to as high as 7.7. The upper end of that range reached well beyond the traditional 6th level, placing some individual sharks in territory that the earlier model had never expected a living marine predator to occupy. These were not fossil remains or theoretical reconstructions. They were living animals carrying decades of feeding history within their own tissue chemistry. The implications extended far beyond academic discussion. Fisheries quotas, Conservation planning and ecosystem recovery models had all been developed from a structure that now appeared incomplete. The policies themselves were built with the best information available at the time, yet the map beneath them had been drawn before the full height of the food chain became visible. As the measurements improved, the architecture supporting those decisions required revision as well. The ocean had not rewritten its own rules. It had simply waited until the tools became precise enough to notice that the chain extended beyond the place where earlier generations believed it ended, leaving the upper reaches occupied by relationships that had not yet been fully described. Few marine animals have carried a reputation as enduring as the great white shark. For much of the 20th century, it represented the final destination of the ocean's food chain in both scientific literature and popular imagination. Powerful, heavily built, and equipped with senses refined through millions of years of evolution, it appeared to stand at the point where predation simply ended. That reputation was not without reason. Adult great white sharks can reach 6 meters in length, which is about 19.7 feet, and weigh nearly 1,900 kilograms. Their mouths contain rows of broad, serrated teeth that are replaced continuously throughout life, ensuring that damaged teeth are quickly succeeded by new ones. Their sense of smell can detect minute traces of blood dispersed through vast volumes of seawater. Beneath the skin, a network of sensory organs known as the ampullae of Lorenzini allows the shark to perceive the faint electrical fields generated by the muscles and beating hearts of nearby animals, even when prey is concealed beneath layers of sand or sediment. Every feature of its body reflects an existence shaped by successful hunting. For many years, those adaptations seemed to define the highest level a marine predator could occupy. Then, during the late 1990s, an observation along the Farallon Islands transformed that assumption into something far less certain. A lone killer whale approached a mature great white shark from below with remarkable precision. Instead of relying on overwhelming force alone, it seized the shark and rolled it upside down. Sharks enter a temporary condition known as tonic immobility. When inverted, their muscles relaxing as normal movement becomes impossible. Held in that position, the shark eventually suffocated because water could no longer move properly across its gills. The encounter ended with astonishing efficiency, completed by a single predator acting entirely on its own. The event was remarkable not because a great white shark died, but because of the method. The attack suggested familiarity rather than chance. It reflected knowledge refined through repeated success, demonstrating that the killer whale understood the shark's physiology well enough to exploit one of its greatest vulnerabilities without prolonged struggle. The consequences reached far beyond a single encounter. Electronic tracking devices attached to nearby great white sharks later revealed an unexpected pattern. After a killer whale killed a shark within a feeding area, the remaining sharks abandoned the region with remarkable speed. Individuals left established hunting grounds and traveled hundreds of kilometers, which is about 124 miles, within only a short period. Some did not return for many months, despite those locations providing reliable food before the encounter occurred. Researchers found evidence that the sharks were responding not merely to the presence of the killer whale itself, but also to chemical signals released by the dead shark. The loss of one individual altered the behavior of an entire local population. A place that had supported generations of successful hunting became temporarily empty, not because prey had vanished, but because another predator had entered the system. This response carried an ecological meaning that extended beyond a single species. Predators at the highest levels of a food web are generally expected to shape the behavior of the animals beneath them. Here, One of the ocean's most celebrated hunters was itself changing its movements, surrendering territory, and avoiding future encounters. Its position remained formidable, yet it was no longer absolute. The revision echoed the pattern already beginning to emerge throughout the living ocean. Each improvement in observation revealed that confidence often ended before the chain itself did. The great white shark remained one of the sea's most extraordinary predators, but it no longer occupied an unquestioned summit. Its movements had become evidence that even the strongest hunter could recognize a presence above its own place in the living order. Across every ocean basin, one predator appears with remarkable consistency, not because it belongs to a single place, but because it has learned to master almost every one. The killer whale moves through polar seas, tropical waters, open oceans, sheltered fjords, and even river mouths, carrying with it a flexibility unmatched by any other marine hunter. Few predators on Earth, whether living in water or on land, display such an extraordinary ability to adapt their hunting to whatever environment lies ahead. Its record of prey reflects that versatility. Great white sharks, blue whales, sperm whales, humpback whales, rays, sea turtles, penguins, and seals all appear among documented prey. In coastal channels of northern forests, killer whales have even been observed hunting moose as they swim between islands. During one remarkable encounter, a killer whale preyed upon a whale shark, the largest fish on Earth, an animal that survives by filtering drifting plankton from the water and likely evolved in a world where almost nothing viewed it as food. The list spans creatures separated by immense differences in size, speed, behavior, and habitat, yet the same predator has learned ways to capture them all. The explanation reaches beyond strength or intelligence alone. Killer whale hunting techniques are passed from one generation to the next through learning. Young calves remain close to their mothers for years, observing repeated hunts until complex behaviors become part of the shared traditions of their family group. Different populations have developed methods found nowhere else, each shaped by local conditions and preserved across generations like inherited knowledge. Along the coast of Patagonia, some pods deliberately slide their own bodies onto beaches to seize young sea lions before pushing themselves back into deeper water. In Norwegian fjords, others gather schools of herring into dense spheres before stunning them with carefully timed blows from their tails. Around Antarctica, coordinated groups create powerful waves that wash resting seals from floating ice into waiting jaws below. Each behavior depends upon cooperation, precision, and repeated practice. A killer whale born into one population does not automatically perform the hunting traditions of another. It must learn the customs of its own family. The same process appears to shape entirely new behaviors. Beginning in the early years of the present decade, groups living near the Iberian Peninsula began interacting with sailing vessels in an unusual way. They repeatedly struck rudders, spun boats away from their original course, and sometimes held them nearly motionless for extended periods. Researchers found evidence that the behavior spread from one individual through social learning rather than emerging independently across every pod. A new pattern had entered their cultural repertoire, carried through observation rather than inherited through biology. Despite decades of research, no confirmed evidence shows adult killer whales being regularly hunted by another living vertebrate. There are no verified recordings of such predation, no stomach contents identifying adult killer whales as routine prey, and no recurring scar patterns pointing toward an unknown hunter. Within the portion of the ocean that people have managed to observe directly, the killer whale occupies the highest documented position. Even so, this conclusion rests upon the boundaries of observation rather than complete certainty. more than 80% of the ocean remains unmapped. Much of the greatest depth lies far below the range where killer whales usually hunt, in water beyond the reach of ordinary exploration. The absence of evidence within those regions cannot become evidence of absence. It simply marks the edge of present knowledge. For now, the killer whale stands at the highest point that human observation has confidently reached. Beneath that horizon, older lineages continue through cold water that has sheltered uninterrupted histories for millions of years, carrying lives that began long before the first killer whale entered the ocean and continued long before any human eye followed them into the depths. Far below the familiar paths of surface predators, there are dives that reshape the body with every descent. Among all living hunters, none undertakes that journey more completely than the sperm whale. It is the largest toothed predator ever known, with adult males reaching about 18 meters in length, which is about 59 feet, and weighing as much as 57 metric tons. Inside that immense body rests the largest brain ever recorded in any animal, weighing about 8 kilograms, nearly 5 times heavier than the average human brain. The tremendous click that first echoed through this story serves purposes beyond navigation alone. Produced deep within the whale's specialized nasal structures and focused through the massive organ occupying much of its head, the pulse carries extraordinary energy through seawater. Researchers have proposed that, at very close range, these concentrated bursts may temporarily stun or disorient prey. The idea remains under investigation, yet it is supported by an intriguing pattern. Squid recovered from sperm whale stomachs are often remarkably intact, showing little external damage despite possessing every opportunity to struggle against capture. The possibility remains that the encounter is decided before the chase fully begins. Each hunt demands physiological changes unlike those of almost any other mammal. The whale descends beyond 2,000 meters, that is nearly 1,243 miles, remaining beneath the surface for as long as 90 minutes. As pressure steadily increases, the rib cage bends inward without breaking. The lungs compress until only a small fraction of their original volume remains. Blood flow is redirected toward the organs that cannot endure interruption, while the heart slows to as few as 2 beats each minute. Rather than resisting the immense pressure, the body temporarily becomes something different, conserving every reserve of oxygen until the ascent begins. Waiting within those depths is prey, unlike anything found nearer the surface. The colossal squid approaches 500 kilograms in mass. Its tentacles carry swiveling hooks capable of rotating into secure positions during combat. The largest confirmed eyes of any living animal watch the surrounding darkness with astonishing sensitivity. Those enormous eyes were not shaped merely to gather faint light. Evidence suggests they evolved to recognize the glowing disturbance left behind as descending sperm whales pass through drifting bioluminescent organisms. The whale may remain hidden from ordinary sight, yet its movement briefly illuminates the water around it, providing the squid with precious moments to react before contact. Neither participant escapes these encounters unchanged. Across the skin of countless sperm whales, researchers have documented circular scars and long parallel marks left by the squid's rotating hooks. These markings appear so consistently that they often help distinguish one individual whale from another. Inside the whale, another record accumulates across an entire lifetime. Squid beaks resist digestion, gradually collecting within the stomach year after year. One examined whale contained more than 18,000 separate beaks preserving a remarkable archive of repeated hunts extending through decades beneath the surface. The relationship reaches beyond simple predation. Persistent pressure from sperm whales appears to have influenced the very anatomy of the colossal squid. Eyes of extraordinary size require immense biological investment, yet the ability to detect an approaching whale before physical contact offers an advantage worth that cost. Predator and prey have shaped one another through countless generations, each refinement answered by another in a contest unfolding far beyond ordinary observation. The sperm whale remains one of the most formidable hunters the ocean has ever produced, yet even such specialization does not place it beyond the reach of forces higher within the living hierarchy. During the closing years of the 20th century, an encounter recorded near the surface revealed that even this master of the deep carried an ancient vulnerability that could no longer remain hidden. One encounter can reveal a relationship that has existed for thousands of generations. In the month of October, during the year 2197, observers aboard a research vessel witnessed such a moment in waters about 130 kilometers from the coast of Central California, which is about 81 miles. A group of roughly 35 killer whales surrounded 9 sperm whales and remained with them for nearly 4 hours. The event would later become one of the most detailed scientific records of large whale predation ever published, preserving behavior that had almost certainly unfolded countless times beyond human sight. The attack was neither chaotic nor improvised. Adult females advanced in carefully timed waves, usually 4 or 5 at a time, striking and withdrawing before another group took their place. Adult males remained farther from the center, forming an outer boundary that prevented escape. Instead of exhausting themselves in constant pursuit, the killer whales gradually wore down the defensive formation, searching for the moment when one sperm whale drifted slightly away from the others. Separation, even if only brief, transformed the balance of the encounter. The isolated whale was immediately surrounded and overwhelmed. The sperm whales answered with a formation that carried the weight of deep evolutionary history. They gathered into what researchers call a rosette, pressing their heads toward one another while their powerful tails faced outward. Every movement created a circle of heavy blows, ready to meet an approaching predator. Such coordination does not emerge during a single afternoon. Behaviors of this complexity develop only through repeated encounters across immense spans of time, refined generation after generation until they become woven into the ordinary lives of an entire species. The rosette itself serves as evidence. Long before any scientist documented this event, sperm whales had already learned that survival depended upon remaining together when killer whales appeared. Mothers, calves, and mature adults each contributed to the defense, creating a living barrier that protected the most vulnerable members of the group. The formation reflects a predator capable of shaping behavior at the level of evolution rather than individual experience. Further confirmation arrived years later through experimental observation rather than direct conflict. During the year 2013, researchers working in the Norwegian Sea attached temporary recording devices to solitary male sperm whales and played underwater recordings of vocalizations produced by mammal hunting killer whales. The response was immediate and remarkably consistent. Foraging dives ended. The whales surfaced sooner than expected. They altered their direction of travel and increased the distance between themselves and the source of the sound. They did not remain to investigate, nor did they prepare for confrontation. Their behavior reflected avoidance. This reaction is especially revealing because it occurs before physical contact ever becomes possible. The acoustic signature alone carries enough information to trigger a change in behavior. Somewhere within the nervous system of the largest toothed predator ever to exist, the sound of a killer whale has become associated with danger through countless generations of natural selection. The living hierarchy of the ocean, therefore, shifts once again. The sperm whale, capable of descending beyond 2,000 meters, that is nearly 1,243 miles, and overcoming prey that few other hunters could approach, does not occupy the final position in the observable chain. Above it stands a predator that hunts through cooperation rather than greater size. Even this conclusion remains bounded by the limits of present observation. Killer whales spend most of their lives within the upper reaches of the ocean compared with the deepest wandering hunters below. Beneath those familiar waters lie colder regions occupied by creatures whose histories stretch back hundreds of years, moving through environments that have revealed only fragments of themselves to human knowledge. The chain continues there, beyond the ordinary reach of both observation and certainty. Age is rarely the first quality associated with a predator. Speed, strength, and explosive movement usually define the image. The Greenland shark ignores each of those expectations. It drifts through Arctic water with such measured persistence that, at first glance, it seems better suited to endurance than pursuit. Yet its place within the ocean's food web has become one of the most puzzling discoveries in marine biology. An adult Greenland shark can reach about 6 meters in length, which is about 19.7 feet, and weigh as much as 1,400 kilograms, placing it close to the great white shark in overall size. Its movement, however, tells a very different story. The average swimming speed is only about 0.3 of a meter each second, roughly 1/4 of the pace of an ordinary human walk. It spends much of its life in water that hovers near 4 degrees Celsius, or 39 degrees Fahrenheit, and regularly descends beyond 2,000 meters, which is about 1.24 miles. Nothing about its appearance suggests a hunter capable of surprising swift marine mammals. Its lifespan is even more extraordinary. Scientists estimated the ages of large females by examining radioactive carbon preserved within the lenses of their eyes. The technique relied upon radioactive material released into the atmosphere during nuclear weapons testing throughout the Cold War, creating a biological timestamp carried into developing tissues. Those measurements indicated ages ranging from about 272 years to more than 512 years, with roughly 400 years representing the middle of the estimated range. Some Greenland sharks alive today may have begun their lives before permanent European settlement took hold across much of North America. No other known vertebrate with a backbone is believed to live longer. Then comes the puzzle that has resisted a satisfying explanation. Stomach examinations have revealed the remains of ringed seals, hooded seals, Atlantic porpoises, and, in documented cases, pieces of polar bear and even an entire horse. These are not animals that ordinarily allow an approaching predator to drift within easy reach. Many possess sharp senses, powerful swimming ability, or constant awareness of danger in open water. Their presence inside the stomach of such an unhurried hunter demands an explanation that observation has not yet fully provided. No researcher has directly recorded a Greenland shark successfully capturing healthy prey in its natural environment. There is no confirmed film of the decisive moment, no eyewitness account revealing the complete sequence. The leading explanation suggests that the shark approaches sleeping seals with astonishing patience, advancing so gradually that its movement becomes almost indistinguishable from the surrounding water. By the time the seal recognizes the danger, escape may no longer be possible. The idea fits the available evidence, yet the complete hunt remains hidden beneath Arctic seas. Vision appears to offer little advantage to many Greenland sharks. Their eyes are frequently colonized by a parasitic crustacean known as Omatocoida elongata. The parasite attaches to the cornea, feeds upon its surface, and often leaves the shark partially or completely blind. Even so, the animals continue feeding successfully, relying instead upon their remarkable senses of smell, pressure detection, and the subtle movements carried through the surrounding water. The deeper scientists examine this species, the stranger its position becomes. Nitrogen isotope analysis has placed some individual Greenland sharks at trophic levels, reaching as high as 7.7, exceeding the positions traditionally assigned to every named apex predator in the modern ocean. Here is a hunter that may live for centuries, swim no faster than a patient current, hunt effectively despite damaged eyesight, and consume prey by methods still hidden from direct observation. It occupies a place in the food chain that seems almost impossible, yet its own body continues to record that impossible history with every passing year. Sometimes the oldest oceans preserve answers that the modern sea seems reluctant to reveal. Beneath layers of stone laid down long before human history, ancient food webs remain frozen in remarkable detail, allowing scientists to compare worlds separated by more than 100 million years. Those forgotten ecosystems offer more than a glimpse into vanished creatures. They provide a measuring stick for understanding what the highest levels of predation can become when enough evidence survives. During the year 2024, researchers published a reconstruction of the marine ecosystem preserved within the Paja Formation of Colombia in the Zoological Journal of the Linnean Society. The rocks record an ancient seafloor from the early Cretaceous period, approximately 120 million years before the present. By examining fossil remains, predator injuries, stomach contents, and ecological relationships, the study rebuilt an entire marine community stretching from microscopic life to its largest hunters. One conclusion stood above the rest. The reconstructed ecosystem contained a seventh trophic level. At that extraordinary position lived enormous marine reptiles exceeding 10 meters in length, which is about 32.8 feet. These animals were classified as hyper-apex predators because they consumed creatures that already occupied the highest recognized predatory roles beneath them. They did not merely sit at the top of the familiar chain. They existed above what had previously been considered the summit. The researchers were careful in describing the implications. No confirmed living equivalent of these ancient hyper-apex predators has been identified in the modern ocean. As far as direct observation can presently determine, the seventh trophic level, documented within that prehistoric ecosystem, has no recognized counterpart swimming through today's seas. Yet another line of evidence refuses to settle so neatly. The revised nitrogen isotope studies discussed earlier measured the feeding histories of living Greenland sharks inhabiting the Canadian Arctic. Individual sharks occupied trophic positions extending from roughly 4 to as high as 7.7. That upper value reaches beyond the traditional sixth level and overlaps the very range occupied by the prehistoric hyper-apex predators reconstructed from the Paja Formation. Two entirely different methods, one built from fossils and the other from living tissue chemistry, arrive at remarkably similar heights within the food web. The comparison becomes even more striking because the Greenland shark is alive today. It is not preserved in stone or known only through ancient bones. It continues moving through Arctic water at this very moment, carrying within its own tissues the accumulated chemical record of decades of feeding. That record indicates a position above every named apex predator currently recognized within the modern ocean. The chemistry, however, records only the level, not the identity of the prey. Nitrogen isotopes reveal where an animal stands within the transfer of energy, yet they cannot identify the specific creatures that provided that energy. Somewhere within the Arctic food web, prey occupying at least the 6th trophic level must exist often enough to sustain these measurements. No confirmed species has yet been identified as fulfilling that role. The evidence points toward a relationship whose participants remain only partly known. The result transforms the 7th trophic level from an ancient curiosity into a living scientific problem. It is no longer confined to seas ruled by marine reptiles that disappeared millions of years ago. The same position appears to exist within the chemistry of an animal still swimming beneath polar ice, progressing through cold water with unhurried persistence, while carrying evidence that the modern ocean extends higher than its own maps presently acknowledge. The Greenland shark, therefore, becomes more than an unusually long-lived predator. It becomes evidence that another layer of the living food web remains unresolved, with an unseen source of energy supporting a position that should not exist unless another chapter of the chain has yet to be fully described. Depth does not simply hide the ocean from view. It reshapes the bodies of the creatures that live there. As sunlight fades and pressure steadily rises, many familiar expectations about size begin to dissolve. Far below the surface, life often follows a different pattern, one that repeatedly favors larger forms where smaller ones might seem more practical. Biologists describe this pattern as deep-sea gigantism. It is a documented phenomenon in which numerous invertebrates and some vertebrates grow substantially larger than their close relatives inhabiting shallow coastal waters or life on land. The reasons remain an active area of research, yet several complementary explanations have emerged, each revealing another way the deep environment alters the balance between survival and growth. The giant isopod provides one of the clearest examples. Resembling an oversized relative of the humble woodlouse, it reaches lengths approaching 76 centimeters, which is about 2.5 feet. Most of its shallow water relatives measure only a few centimeters from end to end. The same tendency appears elsewhere. The colossal squid reaches a confirmed mass of at least 495 kilograms, which is about 1,091 pounds. A single siphonophore, not one animal but a colony functioning as one living body, may extend to 46 meters, which is about 151 feet. Even the giant Pacific octopus develops arm spans approaching 4.3 meters, which is about 14.1 feet. No single explanation accounts for every example. Instead, several influences appear to overlap. Near freezing temperatures, often close to 2 degrees Celsius or 36 degrees Fahrenheit, slow metabolism, and may greatly extend lifespan. An animal that lives longer gains more years, during which growth can continue. In some deep regions, dissolved oxygen remains sufficiently abundant to ease physiological limits that restrict body size elsewhere. Scarce food may also reduce constant competition, allowing successful individuals to dominate available resources over remarkably long periods. Surrounding water supports immense weight, removing many structural burdens that gravity imposes upon equally large animals living on land. Each of these influences reaches beyond anatomy. They also reshape predation. A larger hunter can overpower larger prey, while larger prey demand greater strength, endurance, and specialized hunting strategies from anything attempting to capture them. Every increase in body size alters the balance between predator and victim, raising the practical ceiling of what can be pursued, resisted, or consumed. This creates a gradual scaling effect throughout the deeper food web. As depth increases, opportunities arise for larger bodies to persist across extraordinarily long spans of time. Those larger bodies support interactions between increasingly formidable predators and increasingly resilient prey. The ladder of feeding relationships stretches upward, not because its rules have changed, but because the participants themselves have become capable of sustaining encounters impossible in shallower seas. Much of this immense living community occupies regions that remain only lightly explored. The mesopelagic zone, the bathypelagic zone, and the abyssal zone together encompass an overwhelming share of Earth's marine environment. Direct observation within these depths depends upon specialized submersibles, remotely operated vehicles, and pressure-resistant instruments whose widespread use extends back only a few decades. Even today, only a minute fraction of this vast realm has been examined closely enough to document the lives unfolding there. With every descent, familiar proportions begin to lose their authority. The deeper ocean repeatedly demonstrates that greater pressure does not necessarily produce smaller creatures. Instead, it often allows remarkable size to emerge under conditions unlike any found nearer the surface. As bodies become larger, the relationships binding hunter and hunted expand with them, revealing a food web whose dimensions continue to exceed the scale of the maps that first attempted to describe it. Recognition often shapes reputation. Animals with powerful jaws, massive bodies, or dramatic hunts easily settle into the imagination as rulers of the sea. Sharks, orcas, and sperm whales all fit that image, their lives unfolding in ways that can be witnessed from boats, coastlines, or remarkable underwater encounters. Yet the longest predator ever recorded on Earth belongs to a form of life that rarely appears in conversation, not because it lacks importance, but because it spends nearly all of its existence beyond ordinary observation. During a research expedition conducted in 2020 off the coast of Western Australia, scientists encountered a siphonophore of astonishing scale. The colony measured approximately 46 meters in total length, which is about 151 feet. It exceeded the length of the largest blue whale ever measured and surpassed every other animal whose complete body length has been reliably documented. Its appearance challenged a familiar assumption that the greatest hunters must always possess muscles, bones, and a single recognizable body. A siphonophore is not one individual animal. It is a living colony composed of thousands of highly specialized organisms known as zooids. Every zooid begins from the same original fertilized egg, yet each develops into a permanent specialist. Some propel the colony through the water, others digest captured food, others exist only to reproduce. Still others devote their entire existence to capturing prey with venomous stinging cells. None can survive independently. Together they function as one coordinated predator whose body behaves with remarkable unity despite being assembled from countless individual parts. Among the best-known members of this extraordinary group is the Portuguese man-of-war, whose floating form occasionally drifts onto beaches around the world. The immense specimen discovered near Western Australia belonged instead to the genus Apolemia, a lineage adapted to life within the mesopelagic zone. There, between roughly 200 and 1,000 meters beneath the surface, daylight weakens into a faint glow before disappearing altogether. Across that immense layer, colonies extend through the water like living curtains, occupying far more space than any actively swimming predator could patrol. The importance of these colonies became increasingly clear through a 27-year observational program conducted in Monterey Bay using remotely operated vehicles. Because these vehicles could approach delicate organisms without crushing them, researchers documented feeding behaviors that ordinary sampling methods rarely preserved. The observations revealed Siphonophores acting as genuine apex predators within much of the mesopelagic community. They captured fishes, crustaceans, and gelatinous animals substantially larger than any single zooid, demonstrating that the colony functions as a unified hunting system rather than a collection of unrelated creatures. Their strategy differs from the pursuit practiced by whales or sharks. Instead of chasing prey across open water, the colony unfurls immense curtains of stinging tentacles. Countless drifting filaments create an almost invisible barrier extending through the surrounding sea. Any animal passing into this suspended network encounters thousands of specialized capture structures working together with extraordinary efficiency. The colony waits while the water itself carries potential prey into reach, transforming movement through the ocean into part of the hunting process. Studying these remarkable predators remains extraordinarily difficult. Their bodies possess almost no structural reinforcement. Nets designed to collect marine animals tear them apart before they reach the surface. Even gentle physical contact can destroy the delicate arrangement of zooids that gives the colony its form. Only carefully piloted, remotely operated vehicles, moving with exceptional precision and using lighting that minimizes disturbance, have made prolonged observation possible. Across one of the largest habitats on Earth, a predator longer than any whale drifts through the darkness, assembled from thousands of cooperating lives. It rarely announces its presence, leaves almost nothing behind when disturbed, and dissolves under the very instruments once intended to reveal it. In one of the broadest expanses of the ocean, one of its most effective hunters remained nearly invisible, simply because it could not survive the act of being discovered. Far beneath the reach of ordinary daylight, the ocean does not surrender to darkness. Instead, countless living organisms create their own illumination, transforming the deep water into a place where flashes, pulses, and drifting glows carry messages of survival. Scientists estimate that roughly 76% of deep-sea species generate light through bioluminescence. Below 200 meters, which is about 656 feet, that is nearly 200 meters, this ability is no longer an unusual adaptation. It becomes one of the defining features of life itself, shaping nearly every encounter between hunter and hunted. Each glow serves a purpose refined across hundreds of millions of years. Some signals attract companions. Others confuse attackers or warn rivals. Many exist for only one reason: to improve the odds that the next meal will arrive before the next danger. Across immense stretches of water, every new advantage encourages another response, forming an evolutionary contest that has unfolded far from human observation for longer than forests have covered the continents. Among the most familiar participants is the anglerfish. Extending from the top of its head is a modified dorsal spine, ending in a structure known as the esca. Within this small lure, colonies of light-producing bacteria generate a steady glow that resembles the bioluminescent patterns created by tiny drifting animals. Curious fishes and crustaceans approach what appears to be an easy meal. Instead, they encounter jaws capable of opening with astonishing width. Flexible bones and an expandable stomach allow many anglerfish to swallow prey exceeding the size of their own bodies, turning deception into one of the most effective hunting strategies in the deep ocean. Another predator relies not upon attraction but overwhelming surprise. The Dana octopus squid carries the largest confirmed biological light-producing organs ever documented. Positioned near the tips of its powerful arms, these organs approach the size of lemons and can unleash brilliant flashes during rapid attacks. Researchers believe these bursts momentarily overwhelm the vision of nearby prey, creating a brief instant of confusion before the squid closes the remaining distance. Within the deep sea, even light itself becomes a hunting tool. Prey species have answered with innovations of their own. Many mesopelagic fishes, shrimps, and squids possess rows of light, producing organs across the undersides of their bodies. This strategy, called counter-illumination, allows them to match the faint glow filtering downward from the distant surface. A predator searching upward sees only a continuation of the background light rather than the outline of a passing animal. For countless generations, this living camouflage has hidden vulnerable creatures from eyes scanning the waters below. Predators, however, have not remained unchanged. Certain mesopelagic fishes evolved yellow filtering lenses within their eyes that improve their ability to distinguish true surface light from the carefully balanced glow produced by concealed prey. What once erased a silhouette becomes detectable again. In response, some prey species developed dynamic control over their own light-producing organs, adjusting brightness continuously as surrounding illumination shifts during movement through the water column. Every improvement produces another answer, and every answer inspires another refinement. The pattern extends even to the struggle between colossal squid and sperm whale. As the whale descends, its immense body disturbs clouds of tiny bioluminescent organisms suspended throughout the water. Each disturbed organism emits light, leaving a moving trail that marks the whale's passage. The colossal squid possesses enormous eyes, believed to be especially effective at detecting these expanding flashes. Rather than searching directly for the whale itself, the squid may recognize the luminous disturbance surrounding its approach, gaining precious moments to react before predator and prey finally meet. No lasting victory exists within this contest. Every successful adaptation gradually encourages another solution somewhere else in the food web. Across the deepest reaches of the ocean, light has become both language and weapon, revealing that even where sunlight never arrives, evolution continues to write its history in living stars that appear, vanish, and answer one another without end. Far below the familiar pathways of whales and drifting schools of fish, the seafloor stretches outward in astonishing emptiness. At depths beyond 4,000 meters, that is nearly 2,485 miles, the abyssal plain begins. It extends across more of Earth's surface than all the continents combined, a vast landscape where sunlight has never reached and ordinary rhythms of day and night have long since lost their meaning. Yet even here, life persists through rules unlike those governing any ecosystem nearer the surface. Almost none of the energy sustaining this realm arrives directly from sunlight. Instead, nourishment descends in an almost continuous snowfall of organic remains known as marine snow. Dead plankton, microscopic fragments of larger animals, drifting mucus, and dense pellets released by creatures living far above begin an unhurried descent that may last weeks before settling upon the seabed. Each square meter receives only a few grams during an entire year, a remarkably limited supply spread across an immense plain. By every ordinary expectation, such a modest energy source should struggle to sustain even the simplest communities, much less predators occupying the upper reaches of a food web. Nature answers this limitation through rare, but extraordinary events. When a great whale dies and its immense body sinks untouched through the water column, it delivers an enormous reserve of organic material to the abyssal floor. A single blue whale carcass provides roughly 2,000 kilograms of organic material for each square meter surrounding the immediate resting place. That amount equals approximately 2,000 years of ordinary marine snow arriving in the same location, compressed into one remarkable moment. What appears at first to be an ending becomes the beginning of an entirely different ecological story. The first arrivals are swift scavengers capable of detecting the descending feast across remarkable distances. Sleeper sharks, hagfishes, and rat-tail fishes gather to strip away soft tissue with remarkable efficiency. Their feeding transforms the landscape within weeks or months, exposing the heavier bones beneath. Soon afterward, another community takes over. Crustaceans and segmented marine worms spread through the surrounding sediment, consuming fragments overlooked by the larger scavengers while recycling nutrients into forms accessible to countless smaller organisms. Even after little visible flesh remains, the whale continues sustaining life. Deep within the bones lie rich stores of lipids unavailable to most animals. Specialized bacteria colonize these remains and begin breaking down those compounds through processes that occur without oxygen. As hydrogen sulfide is released, an entirely new ecosystem emerges. Chemosynthetic microorganisms flourish, drawing energy from chemical reactions rather than sunlight. Their growth supports mollusks, worms, crustaceans, and additional predators that may inhabit the site for many years, extending the influence of one whale far beyond its lifetime. Elsewhere, across the abyssal floor, another source of energy rises from below rather than falling from above. Hydrothermal vents form where cracks in the ocean floor release mineral-rich water heated to nearly 400 degrees Celsius or 752 degrees Fahrenheit. Although the surrounding seawater remains near freezing, these vent fluids carry dissolved chemicals from deep within the planet itself. Instead of depending upon photosynthesis, entire biological communities rely upon chemosynthesis, drawing usable energy from hydrogen sulfide and related compounds produced beneath the crust. Around these vents flourish dense gatherings of tube worms, shrimps, crabs, octopuses, fishes, and countless microorganisms, many found nowhere else on Earth. Predators still pursue prey. Competition still shapes survival, and ecological relationships remain every bit as intricate as those nearer the surface. The difference lies not in the structure of the food web, but in the source of its energy. Here, the warmth-driving life originates within the planet rather than from the distant sun, revealing that the deepest ocean has never represented the end of Earth's living systems. It is another world entirely, sustained by different forces, following its own enduring pattern beneath the weight of the sea. Beyond 6,000 meters, which is about 3,728 miles, the familiar contours of the seafloor give way to immense trenches carved into the crust of the planet. This realm is known as the Hadal zone, a name drawn from ancient mythology to describe a place lying beneath every ordinary expectation. Here, the weight of the ocean becomes almost unimaginable. Pressure rises beyond 1,000 times that experienced at the surface, compressing every space that is not perfectly adapted to endure it. Yet, even under such extraordinary conditions, life continues with remarkable persistence. The deepest of these trenches descends to nearly 10,935 meters. That is nearly 6,795 miles, a depth sufficient to conceal the summit of Mount Everest beneath more than 2 kilometers of water, which is about 1.2 miles, with additional ocean still stretching overhead. For generations, scientists regarded places like this as almost entirely beyond the reach of complex organisms. Near freezing water, perpetual darkness, crushing pressure, and an almost non-existent supply of food seem to leave little opportunity for anything larger than microscopic life. Each new expedition has gradually replaced those expectations with observation. Cameras and sampling systems lowered into these immense depths have revealed communities that survive without any sign of struggle written across their appearance. Their existence is not an exception to nature's rules. It is evidence that those rules extend farther than earlier generations imagined. Every confirmed discovery has expanded the known limits of animal life, showing that the deepest valleys of the ocean are inhabited rather than abandoned. Among the most remarkable inhabitants is the Mariana snailfish, confirmed during observations completed in 2023 at a depth of 8,336 meters, that is nearly 5,180 miles. Its body appears pale and delicate, almost translucent beneath artificial lights, and its length is comparable to that of a human forearm. Such an animal seems impossibly fragile, yet its tissues contain specialized adaptations that prevent the immense pressure from collapsing essential biological structures. It feeds upon small crustaceans living across the trench floor, creatures that themselves exist where earlier scientific understanding suggested they should not. Those crustaceans present another puzzle. Amphipods inhabit the deepest portions of nearly every major trench examined by researchers. Analysis of their stomach contents has revealed remains of fishes and other animals that never lived permanently at Hadal depths. The evidence suggests that organic material continually descends across multiple regions of the ocean before finally reaching the bottom. Some carcasses sink intact through thousands of meters, becoming nourishment only after an immense journey downward. Other fragments are carried gradually by currents until they settle within the trenches, connecting distant ecosystems that never physically meet. Occasionally, modern technology captures moments that reveal how active these depths truly are. During 2024, free-falling baited camera systems operating near the Samoan Passage at approximately 1,000 meters, that is nearly 621 miles, recorded the Dana octopus squid rushing toward the equipment. Brilliant flashes erupted from the enormous light, producing organs at the tips of its arms, creating an intense display immediately before contact. The attack demonstrated that even far below ordinary observation, predatory behavior remains swift, coordinated, and highly specialized. Despite these remarkable glimpses, the Hadal Zone remains one of the least explored environments on Earth. Every expedition samples only a minute fraction of an immense landscape extending across trenches scattered throughout the world's oceans. The animals living there consume prey, avoid predators, reproduce, and compete according to ecological relationships that remain only partially understood. The deepest communities are not isolated curiosities existing beyond the food chain described nearer the surface. They belong to another chapter of that same continuous story, unfolding beneath pressures that challenge engineering as much as biology, where each successful observation reveals not an ending to discovery, but a wider horizon hidden beneath the weight of the sea. Knowledge of the deepest predators has rarely arrived through direct observation. Instead, it has accumulated like scattered pieces of an immense puzzle, each fragment carried upward from places beyond ordinary reach. A scar upon living skin, an unexpected object recovered from a stomach, a trail preserved in soft sediment, or a brief encounter recorded by one of the very few remotely operated vehicles capable of surviving, the descent has often revealed more than months of searching through open water. The hidden relationships of the deep have been reconstructed from consequences rather than spectacles. Among the most valuable sources of evidence is stomach content analysis. Every predator carries a partial record of its recent meals, yet that record is far from complete. Bones, shells, ear stones from fishes, squid beaks, and other durable structures withstand digestion long enough to be recovered and identified. Soft-bodied animals leave almost nothing behind. A predator feeding almost entirely upon gelatinous organisms or other delicate prey may possess a stomach appearing nearly empty despite having eaten regularly. Entire feeding strategies can therefore remain concealed simply because the evidence dissolves before scientists are able to examine it. The great encounters between sperm whales and colossal squid became accepted not because anyone watched them unfold, but because both animals carried unmistakable traces of one another. Circular scars and long parallel marks spread across the skin of many sperm whales matched the rotating hooks lining the arms of colossal squid. Some scar patterns appeared unusually deep and widely spaced, suggesting that at least part of these encounters occurred farther beneath the surface than researchers had once believed possible for the whales themselves. The struggle became visible only after both participants returned from depths where human observation remained almost absent. Another mystery rested unnoticed upon the ocean floor for many years. Along deep sediment near the waters surrounding New Zealand, scientists repeatedly documented unusual horseshoe-shaped impressions pressed into the seabed at depths of 1,600 feet, which is about 488 meters. Their origin remained uncertain for almost a decade. Only after extended investigation did researchers determine that rat-tail fishes produced the marks while pressing their mouths into soft sediment to capture buried prey. The traces endured far longer than the brief movements that created them, allowing behavior to be reconstructed years after it occurred. The colossal squid itself illustrates how incomplete direct observation has remained. For roughly a century, understanding of the species depended largely upon hard beaks recovered from sperm whale stomachs. Because those beaks resist digestion, they accumulate throughout a whale's lifetime and sometimes number in the thousands within a single individual. From these durable remains, scientists estimated body size, distribution, and feeding relationships long before living animals could be examined in meaningful detail. The predator became scientifically familiar through fragments, while the complete animal remained almost entirely beyond sustained observation. Some events almost certainly occur with astonishing regularity despite never being witnessed directly. An adult colossal squid confronting a descending sperm whale at a depth exceeding 2,000 meters, that is nearly 1,243 miles, represents one such encounter. Countless generations of both species have occupied overlapping habitats, carrying the marks of repeated conflict. Yet no human observer has watched the full sequence unfold where it naturally happens. The immense darkness, crushing pressure, and vastness of the deep have preserved those moments beyond ordinary reach. For that reason, the deep-sea food chain remains, in many respects, an exceptionally well-supported scientific inference rather than a continuous visual record. Each discovery strengthens the framework, while also revealing how much remains concealed. Stomachs opened aboard research vessels, scars carried home upon living bodies, abandoned traces preserved in sediment, and fleeting images captured by rare expeditions together form the map currently available. Beneath that map, the oldest predation stories in the ocean continue without witnesses, leaving only the evidence that drifts upward for patient minds to assemble. Every journey through the ocean food chain has followed predators pursuing prey across open water, along the seafloor, and into depths where sunlight never arrives. Yet another food chain has accompanied every step, hidden within the bodies of those very hunters. It does not replace the familiar hierarchy. Instead, it threads through every level of it, drawing nourishment from animals that are themselves feeding on something else. Every powerful predator also serves as a habitat, carrying smaller lives that depend upon it with remarkable persistence. Among the oldest of these relationships is found upon the eye of the Greenland shark, a small crustacean parasite known as Omatocoida elongata attaches itself directly to the surface of the cornea, feeding upon living tissue over extended periods. In many individuals, the damage becomes severe enough to reduce vision dramatically or eliminate it altogether. Early naturalists noticed the parasite so frequently that some wondered whether it might simply share space with the shark without causing harm. Closer examination revealed a different reality. The attachment slowly injures the eye, consuming tissue while remaining firmly anchored to its host. Remarkably, the shark continues to survive and hunt despite carrying this burden. Vision appears to become less important than other senses refined through centuries beneath cold northern waters. The lateral line system, stretching along the sides of the body, detects delicate pressure changes created by nearby movement, while an acute sense of smell follows faint chemical traces drifting through the current. Together, these abilities allow the animal to locate opportunities even when its eyesight has been greatly diminished. The predator remains formidable, although one of its primary sensory organs has been partially surrendered to another consumer, occupying a far smaller scale. This relationship illustrates that parasites occupy a functional place within every food web. They obtain energy continuously from living hosts, rather than killing them outright. Their survival depends upon preserving that source of nourishment long enough to reproduce and spread to new hosts. In many species, the influence extends even further. Certain parasites alter behavior, movement, or feeding patterns in ways that improve their own chances of transmission. The host continues living, often unaware in any biological sense that its actions have been subtly redirected by an organism relying upon its body for shelter and food. An especially remarkable example appears in the tongue-eating louse, a crustacean parasite whose life unfolds inside the mouth of a fish. Entering through the gills during an early stage of development, it settles upon the tongue and gradually interrupts the blood supply until the tissue withers away. The parasite then occupies the remaining attachment point, effectively replacing the missing organ with its own body. The fish resumes feeding much as before, swallowing meal after meal, while the replacement tongue receives nourishment from mucus and fragments of food passing across its surface. Every successful hunt sustains not only the fish, but also the animal that has become part of its own anatomy. Far below the surface, relationships of this kind remain only faintly understood because the hosts themselves have scarcely been examined. Every newly described deep-sea animal brings the possibility of discovering companions living upon it, within it, or alongside it in ways that have escaped notice for countless generations. Each unexplored species may support an entire community of organisms whose existence depends upon remaining almost impossible to observe. Seen from this perspective, the food chain is no longer a simple ladder reaching from prey to predator. It becomes a living network, woven through bodies as well as between them. Hunters consume other hunters. Parasites consume the hunters from within. Microscopic organisms consume the remains left behind. And even viruses draw energy by infecting bacteria, breaking down bones upon the abyssal plane. The flow of life never truly stops at any level. It folds inward again and again, revealing that every consumer eventually becomes nourishment for another hidden participant in the same enduring story. Night arrives without fanfare across the open ocean, yet beneath the surface an immense procession begins to rise. It has no leader, no destination visible from above, and no single species directing its rhythm. Countless living bodies drift upward together through the water column, following a pattern repeated every day across nearly every sea on Earth. Hidden from human sight, this movement surpasses every migration witnessed on land, not in distance alone, but in the sheer abundance of life taking part. As darkness settles over the surface, lanternfish, krill, copepods, squid, myctophid fishes, and hundreds of other inhabitants of the mesopelagic realm leave the shelter of deeper water. Many begin their ascent from depths between 200 meters and 1,000 meters, traveling toward the sunlit layers where microscopic plants and drifting animals are most abundant. There, they feed beneath the cover of night, gathering energy that has entered the ocean through sunlight before beginning the long descent again as dawn approaches. The cycle repeats every day, through changing seasons and across entire oceans, continuing whether or not a single human vessel happens to pass overhead. The combined mass involved in this movement is almost beyond imagination. Scientists estimate that hundreds of millions of tons of living material participate in this daily exchange between darkness and light. No migration across plains, forests, or skies approaches the same scale. Rather than spreading across continents, this immense procession unfolds through a vertical landscape, with life moving through towering columns of water instead of across the ground. This continual motion transforms the structure of the marine food web. Predators and prey cannot be assigned permanent places when the animals themselves travel between different worlds within the same day. A lanternfish feeding near the surface after sunset becomes part of an entirely different community once daylight returns and it descends again. Near the surface, it consumes drifting organisms nourished by sunlight. Far below, it becomes nourishment for hunters that rarely venture into brighter water. The same individual occupies different ecological roles according to its location and the passing of time, binding together habitats that might otherwise appear completely separate. The consequences extend far beyond the animals themselves. Each ascent carries carbon absorbed near the surface into the deeper ocean. After feeding, these migrating creatures return downward, where respiration, waste, and eventually death release that carbon into waters far below the atmosphere. Oceanographers describe this process as the biological pump, one of the most important natural pathways through which carbon is transferred away from the air and stored within the deep sea for extended periods. Every nightly migration, therefore, links the survival of individual organisms with the chemistry of the entire planet. Recent research conducted during 2024 by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution added another layer to this moving landscape. Large sharks, once believed to spend most of their lives within surface waters, were tracked descending into the mesopelagic zone during daylight hours. Rather than remaining above, they followed the retreating migration into depths between 200 meters and 1,000 meters. Their movements closely matched those of big-scale pomfret, a midwater fish connecting surface feeding grounds with deeper predator communities. The hunters were not tied to a fixed hunting ground. They followed the living river, flowing upward and downward through the ocean each day. Seen together, these observations reveal that the marine food chain is not a rigid staircase rising from one level to the next. It is a living current that continually rearranges itself through the passing hours. Every sunrise and every sunset reshape the encounters between hunter and hunted, carrying energy through 1,000 meters of water before beginning the same timeless passage once again. For generations, scientists pieced together the ocean food web from fragments carried back to the surface. A beak inside a whale's stomach, a scar across a predator's skin, or the contents of a fishing net became clues assembled into an increasingly detailed picture. Yet the picture always depended upon remains left behind after feeding had already ended. Only when cameras followed living animals through their own environment for decades did an entirely different view begin to emerge. Between 1989 and 2016, researchers from the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute carried out the longest sustained, direct observation of a deep-sea food web ever completed. Across 27 years, remotely operated vehicles descended again and again into the waters of Monterey Bay, recording feeding events involving hundreds of species. Rather than asking what had been eaten after digestion, the project sought to witness predation as it unfolded naturally beneath the surface. The accumulated recordings revealed a world far more interconnected than earlier methods had suggested. Relationships that had been reconstructed indirectly could now be observed with remarkable clarity. Animals previously considered uncommon predators appeared repeatedly on camera capturing prey, while others thought to occupy relatively simple ecological roles behaved with far greater flexibility. Every new encounter added another thread to a web that steadily grew more intricate with each passing expedition. Among the greatest surprises were the gelatinous animals. Jellyfish, comb jellies, Siphonophores, and their close relatives had long been underestimated because traditional stomach analysis rarely preserved evidence of their existence. Their soft bodies dissolve almost completely during digestion, leaving little behind for scientists to identify. As a result, predators feeding heavily upon them often appeared to possess nearly empty stomachs, creating the false impression that these prey contributed very little to the broader ecosystem. The camera told another story entirely. Gelatinous predators repeatedly captured fishes, crustaceans, and other invertebrates that were sometimes much larger than individual portions of their own delicate bodies. Their transparent forms concealed highly effective hunting strategies, refined through immense spans of evolutionary time. Some drifted with extended tentacles suspended like living curtains across the water, while others pursued prey more actively. Far from occupying insignificant positions, many proved to be dominant hunters within the mesopelagic community. As the observations accumulated, another assumption quietly dissolved. The deep-sea food web could no longer be represented as a simple chain rising neatly from prey to predator. Instead, it resembled an intricate network in constant motion. A species observed consuming smaller animals during one encounter might appear moments later as prey for something larger. Seasonal shifts, changing depths, and differences in body size continually altered these relationships, preventing any single position from remaining permanent. Even the life history of an individual species reshaped its ecological role. Juveniles often occupied entirely different trophic positions from mature adults, feeding upon different prey while remaining vulnerable to predators their older forms might eventually consume. Within a single species, Multiple positions in the food web existed simultaneously, distributed across different stages of growth. The network expanded not only through diversity of species, but also through the changing lives of each participant. Perhaps the most significant lesson emerged from comparing these direct observations with decades of stomach content analysis. The older approach had not been fundamentally incorrect. It had simply possessed an unavoidable blind spot: soft-bodied predators that dominated large portions of the mesopelagic ecosystem left almost no durable evidence after digestion. Their ecological importance had remained largely hidden because the primary method used to reconstruct marine feeding relationships could scarcely detect them at all. The result was both humbling and illuminating. The food web described for much of the previous century had been assembled from reliable evidence, yet important participants had remained almost invisible within that evidence itself. Only years of patient observation revealed how many of the most common predators had been present all along, moving through the deep ocean beyond the reach of methods that depended upon what could survive digestion rather than what truly ruled the water around them. A single chemical signature preserved within living tissue can sometimes speak across years more faithfully than any moment witnessed by human eyes. Long after a hunt has ended and every visible trace has disappeared, atoms gathered from countless meals remain woven into muscle and skin, preserving a history that cannot easily be erased. From these enduring records, scientists have begun uncovering an unexpected extension of the ocean food web, one that reaches beyond the familiar boundaries described for generations. A reconstruction of the ancient marine ecosystem preserved within the Paja Formation, published during 2024, identified evidence for a seventh trophic level occupied by enormous marine reptiles. These extraordinary hunters existed above the predators traditionally regarded as apex consumers. They fed upon animals that themselves preyed upon the dominant hunters of their age, forming a hyper-apex position unlike anything confidently recognized in the modern sea. The researchers concluded that no confirmed living equivalent had yet been identified. Yet another line of investigation, focused not upon fossils but upon living Arctic animals, produced a result that settled beside that conclusion with remarkable tension. Scientists examining Greenland sharks through nitrogen isotope rescaling measured trophic positions extending as high as 7.7. This value did not emerge from speculation or indirect comparison. It came directly from the chemical composition of the shark's own tissues, representing an integrated record of food consumed over many years, perhaps even decades. Nitrogen isotopes accumulate in predictable ways as energy moves upward through a food web. Each feeding relationship leaves a subtle chemical imprint, allowing researchers to estimate the trophic position occupied by the consumer. Although this method cannot identify every prey species individually, it provides a reliable indication of where an animal stands within the broader hierarchy of predation. A measurement approaching 7.7 therefore carries considerable significance because it reflects sustained feeding at an exceptionally elevated ecological level rather than an isolated or unusual meal. The measurement itself introduces an unresolved problem. Something occupying trophic level 6 or higher must be providing nourishment to at least some Greenland sharks within Arctic waters. The isotope record identifies the position of that prey within the food web, yet it does not reveal its identity. No corresponding species has been confirmed through direct observation. No stomach content has supplied an unmistakable answer. The chemical evidence indicates that such feeding relationships exist, while the participants themselves remain largely concealed. Several possibilities remain consistent with the available evidence. The sharks may consume animals that themselves feed upon recognized apex predators, creating an additional ecological layer that has received little scientific attention. Another possibility is that the structure of the Arctic marine ecosystem remains incompletely mapped, with important pathways of energy transfer still awaiting discovery beneath the ice and within waters visited only rarely by research expeditions. Neither explanation has yet gathered enough evidence to settle the question completely. What gives this finding such importance is its connection to the broader pattern already emerging throughout the ocean. Again and again, careful observation has revealed ecosystems more intricate than earlier models suggested. Hidden predators have appeared where none were expected. Invisible feeding relationships have emerged once technology advanced enough to observe them. Chemical records have extended the reach of direct observation into years that no camera could have continuously recorded. The possibility of a living seventh trophic level, therefore, no longer belongs only to prehistoric seas populated by vanished giants. It now rests, at least in part, within the tissues of animals swimming through present-day Arctic waters. The Greenland shark carries this possibility not as a legend or speculation, but as measurable chemistry preserved within its own body. The ocean food web continues beyond familiar boundaries, not because imagination requires it, but because the evidence repeatedly suggests that the living chain extends farther than even its most careful revisions have yet fully described. Looking across the evidence gathered from every layer of the ocean, a recurring pattern begins to emerge. It does not point toward a single, extraordinary animal. Instead, it reveals something about the way scientific understanding itself changes. Again and again, the title of apex predator has shifted, not because the ocean changed, but because human observation reached a little farther than it had before. For many years, the great white shark occupied that highest position in both scientific literature and public imagination. Its size, speed, sensory abilities, and hunting success appeared to place it above every other marine predator. That conclusion rested upon the information available at the time. As tracking technology improved and long-term field observations accumulated around the Farallon Islands, a broader picture developed. Groups of killer whales were documented hunting great white sharks, driving them from feeding grounds and producing behavioral changes that lasted for months after a single encounter. The designation changed because the available evidence had changed. Attention then shifted toward the deeper ocean, where sperm whales seemed to occupy the highest known predatory role. Their remarkable diving ability allowed them to hunt animals beyond the reach of almost every other large marine hunter. For a time, this appeared to establish a separate apex position within the deep sea itself. Yet another revision followed, a documented attack by killer whales upon a pod of sperm whales during the late 1900s, together with experimental studies demonstrating defensive acoustic responses when sperm whales detected killer whale vocalizations, showed that even these immense divers recognized another predator capable of threatening them under particular circumstances. Today, the killer whale generally occupies the functional apex designation throughout much of the scientific literature. Even this description is presented with careful language. Researchers commonly qualify the conclusion by referring to the observable ocean or to the evidence currently available. Such wording reflects an important principle of science. A conclusion is accepted because it matches existing observations while remaining open to revision if stronger evidence appears. That possibility already exists within another body of research. Nitrogen isotope analysis performed on Greenland sharks has produced trophic positions reaching approximately 7.7 in some individuals. These measurements describe years of accumulated feeding rather than isolated events, indicating sustained consumption at an exceptionally elevated trophic position. Yet the isotope record cannot identify the prey responsible for producing that value. The chemical signature establishes the level, while the identity of the organisms occupying that level remains uncertain. Because of this uncertainty, no formal reassignment of apex status has occurred. The available evidence is substantial, but scientific standards require more than isotope measurements alone before redefining an ecological hierarchy. Direct observations, independently confirmed feeding relationships, and additional supporting data remain necessary before such a revision could be accepted with confidence. The unanswered question therefore remains suspended, supported by measurable evidence, without yet reaching a definitive conclusion. Seen together, these successive revisions follow an almost identical structure. Each predator, once regarded as the highest known hunter, occupied that position only within the limits of contemporary observation. As remotely operated vehicles descended farther, isotope techniques became more refined. Long-term tracking studies expanded across decades, and biological samples accumulated from increasingly inaccessible environments. Another layer of ecological complexity appeared. Every improvement in observation enlarged the map rather than completing it. This repeating pattern carries its own quiet significance. The history of marine predation has not been a sequence of final answers, but a succession of increasingly detailed approximations shaped by the boundaries of available evidence. Much of the ocean still lies beyond sustained observation, particularly within the deepest waters where direct exploration remains uncommon. As those boundaries continue to recede, the living hierarchy may continue to change with them. The chain described today is therefore best understood as the clearest portrait presently available, drawn from an ocean that continues to reveal more of itself each time human knowledge reaches a little farther into its depths. Long before its source was understood, a single sound drifted through the Pacific Ocean and briefly expanded the boundaries of what seemed possible. It arrived not as a shape caught on camera or a creature recovered from the depths, but as a pattern of pressure passing through seawater, carrying with it no image, only evidence that something powerful had happened far beyond ordinary reach. During the late 1900s, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration maintained a network of underwater listening stations originally developed during the Cold War. Their purpose had been military, tracking submarine movements across immense distances beneath the surface. By the time those instruments turned increasingly toward scientific observation, they had become one of the few systems capable of listening across entire ocean basins. In the year 1997, that network detected an extraordinary acoustic event originating from the direction of the southern coast of South America. The signal reached two separate hydrophone arrays positioned nearly 4,800 kilometers apart, which is about 2,983 miles. For the same sound to arrive at both locations, it had to possess remarkable energy, traveling across an immense volume of seawater while remaining strong enough to register on instruments separated by almost the width of an ocean basin. Few naturally occurring sounds retain such coherence over so great a distance. Its frequency characteristics resembled those commonly associated with biological sources. Whales, fish, and many marine invertebrates communicate through low-frequency calls capable of traveling enormous distances underwater. Yet this particular recording carried an intensity beyond anything measured from known living marine animal. No documented whale species, no fish, no squid, and no other recognized organism had demonstrated the ability to generate a sound of such extraordinary amplitude. Because of its unusual acoustic character, researchers assigned it a simple nickname that reflected its distinctive profile. They called it the bloop. For several years, the recording resisted confident explanation. It entered popular imagination as a possible signal from an unknown giant animal inhabiting the deepest parts of the Pacific. The speculation grew because the sound itself was genuine, while its origin remained uncertain. Scientists continued comparing the recording against expanding libraries of underwater acoustic events, seeking a source that matched both its frequency pattern and remarkable power. As additional observations accumulated, a far more convincing explanation emerged. Large icebergs breaking apart or grinding against the seafloor within the Scotia Sea produced sounds with strikingly similar acoustic signatures. Careful comparison showed that enormous fractures within glacial ice could generate the same sweeping frequency profile detected during the original event. The consensus gradually settled upon an icequake rather than an unidentified organism. The explanation remains strongly supported by subsequent evidence and is widely accepted within the scientific community. Even so, the importance of the recording did not disappear once its source became understood. Instead, it highlighted the immense difference between detecting an event and immediately explaining it. Instruments specifically designed to monitor the global ocean had captured a signal that initially exceeded every familiar biological expectation. The recording demonstrated that the ocean routinely produces phenomena capable of surprising even the systems built to observe it. That lesson continues today. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration still records unusual sounds across the world's oceans. Most eventually find explanations through patient comparison, improved instrumentation, and expanding scientific knowledge. A smaller number remain under active investigation while additional evidence accumulates. None of these unresolved recordings require extraordinary creatures to justify their existence. They simply reflect an environment operating across distances, pressures, and frequencies that human beings have only recently begun to monitor continuously. The ocean speaks in ways that rarely reach human ears. Beneath familiar waves, vibrations travel through darkness across thousands of kilometers, carrying stories that often begin as puzzles before settling into understanding. Each newly explained sound strengthens confidence in the scientific process, while each unexplained recording serves as another reminder that the catalog of the living ocean and of the physical world surrounding it is still being assembled. Rather than approaching completion, the catalog of ocean life continues to expand with every expedition that reaches beyond familiar waters. Each voyage into the deep returns with observations that did not exist before departure, reminding researchers that the living ocean is not a finished inventory waiting on a shelf. It is an unfolding record, revised continuously as new habitats come into view and previously unseen organisms enter scientific description. Nearly 2,000 new marine species are formally described every year. That figure does not represent a sudden burst of evolution. These organisms have existed all along, occupying their own places within complex ecological relationships while remaining absent from scientific literature simply because no one had documented them. Every newly described species adds another thread to an already intricate web of feeding relationships, competition, cooperation, and survival. One expedition into the Southern Ocean during the year 2025 illustrated this process with remarkable clarity. Among the discoveries were approximately 30 previously undescribed deep-sea species, each contributing another piece to an ecosystem that remains only partially understood. One of the most striking organisms was a carnivorous sponge covered with tiny hook-like structures. Unlike familiar sponges that filter microscopic particles from passing water, this animal physically trapped small prey against its surface before digesting them. It represented another example of how evolutionary solutions continue to surprise even within groups once believed to be thoroughly understood. Discoveries of this kind are no longer isolated events. The Nippon Foundation Nekton Ocean Census, a coordinated international effort dedicated to documenting marine biodiversity, formally recorded more than 800 new marine species within a single year of organized exploration. Every addition required careful examination, comparison with existing collections, and detailed scientific description before becoming part of the recognized catalog of life. Behind every new name stood an organism that had already occupied its ecological role long before humans learned of its existence. The same pattern emerged from extensive exploration across the Pacific Ocean. During the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration campaign to address Pacific Monument, science, technology, and ocean needs expeditions, remotely operated vehicles completed 187 dives, accumulating nearly 900 hours of direct observation beneath the surface. Across those missions, researchers documented more than 347,000 individual organisms, yet nearly 79% of those observations could not be identified to the species level. The limitation did not arise from poor imagery or uncertain measurements. Many of the animals simply had no matching entry within existing scientific catalogs. Every unidentified organism carries ecological consequences extending far beyond its own description. Each one feeds upon something, avoids something, competes with something, and serves as nourishment for something else. Adding a species to the catalog also adds its connections to the wider network. The food web therefore becomes denser with every discovery, not merely longer. Relationships multiply as new interactions emerge between organisms already known and those only recently recognized. Earlier observations from long-term exploration offered another reminder that absence from scientific models does not imply absence from nature. Direct studies within the deep mesopelagic revealed that gelatinous predators occupied dominant hunting roles, despite leaving almost no durable traces inside predator stomachs after digestion. For decades, conventional dietary analysis overlooked many of these animals because they dissolved completely, making them nearly invisible to one of the principal methods used to reconstruct marine food webs. Their importance became evident only after sustained visual observation beneath the surface. Taken together, these discoveries reveal a consistent direction rather than isolated surprises. Every revision enlarges the network, increases the number of documented interactions, and replaces apparent simplicity with greater complexity. The marine food web is not a finished illustration printed inside a textbook. It resembles a manuscript whose pages continue to grow as exploration advances into places where observation has only recently become possible. The deeper the catalog extends, the more complete the picture becomes, while still revealing how much of the living ocean remains beyond the boundaries of present knowledge. Long after the research vessel has returned to harbor and the instruments have been lifted from the sea, the consequences of an incomplete food web remain. They do not stay confined within scientific papers or classroom diagrams. They become fishing regulations, conservation strategies, harvest quotas, and management decisions that shape entire ecosystems. When the structure beneath those decisions is missing important connections. The ocean responds according to its own reality, rather than the simpler version humans believed they understood. For centuries, the Atlantic cod population off the coast of Newfoundland supported one of the largest fisheries on Earth. Generations built communities around its seasonal abundance, and the apparent reliability of those fish encouraged the belief that the resource would continually replenish itself. Yet during the early years of the 1990s, the population collapsed with astonishing speed. Within less than a decade, cod numbers fell to below 1% of their historical abundance, transforming an ecosystem that had seemed remarkably stable. The decline was driven primarily by sustained overfishing, yet the ecological response proved far more complicated than expected. Fisheries models used to establish harvest limits were built upon a food web that emphasized straightforward predator and prey relationships. Cod certainly occupied an important place within those models, but their influence across multiple ecological roles was underestimated. Adult cod hunted smaller fishes and countless invertebrates while simultaneously serving as prey for larger fishes and marine mammals. They linked numerous pathways that extended across several trophic positions rather than occupying a single, fixed location within the web. As cod populations diminished, those interconnected relationships shifted together. Species previously held in balance expanded into newly available ecological space. Some consumed juvenile cod in greater numbers. Others competed with recovering cod for the same food resources. Instead of returning to its earlier condition once fishing pressure declined, the ecosystem reorganized itself into another stable arrangement with different dominant species occupying roles that had once belonged to cod. More than 3 decades have now passed, yet the cod population has not returned to its former abundance. Recovery efforts continue, but they operate within an ecosystem that no longer resembles the one that existed before the collapse. The living network adjusted itself to the removal of one of its major components, and many of those adjustments now work against the restoration of the previous balance. The web did not pause while humans reconsidered their assumptions. It continued adapting according to interactions that had never been fully represented within the original models. Comparable patterns have appeared in fisheries across many regions of the world. Different species occupy the central role. Different coastlines frame the story, yet the underlying lesson remains remarkably consistent. Simplified ecological models often predicted gradual responses, followed by recovery once harvest levels decreased. Real ecosystems frequently responded through cascading interactions that spread across unexpected pathways, altering predator populations, prey abundance, reproductive success, and competition in ways that exceeded the predictions of those earlier frameworks. A food web containing 7 trophic levels, overlapping feeding relationships, soft-bodied predators that disappear completely during digestion, parasites operating within every consumer, and animals shifting between trophic positions throughout their lives cannot be expected to behave like a simple chain of separate links. Removing one species does not merely subtract a single connection. It changes hundreds of interactions unfolding simultaneously across different depths, seasons, life stages, and ecological communities. Each scientific revision therefore carries consequences extending well beyond academic understanding. Every newly recognized feeding relationship improves the ability to anticipate how ecosystems respond to disturbance. Every previously overlooked predator strengthens the accuracy of conservation planning. Every additional connection helps transform management from educated approximation toward a closer reflection of the living ocean itself. The sea preserves the outcome of every harvest, every protection effort, and every mistaken assumption. Its responses emerge gradually across years and generations, revealing that the greatest challenge has never been persuading the ocean to follow human models. It has always been learning to build models that follow the ocean. There comes a point in every long investigation when the most valuable result is no longer another discovery, but a careful accounting of what has truly been established. Across the living ocean, certainty and uncertainty exist side by side, separated not by imagination but by evidence. The distinction matters because the sea has repeatedly shown that confident assumptions often dissolve when new observations finally emerge from depths that remained beyond reach for generations. What is confirmed begins with the animal presently recognized as the functional apex predator of the observable ocean. The orca occupies that position because documented observations show it hunting an extraordinary range of prey. Its recorded diet includes fishes, sharks, rays, seals, sea lions, dolphins, porpoises, whales, seabirds, sea turtles, and even other apex predators. No other non-human predator has been confirmed feeding across such a broad collection of major animal groups. Based on the evidence currently available, the designation is well supported within the portion of the ocean that scientists have been able to observe directly. It is also confirmed that living marine food webs extend through at least 6 trophic levels, while nitrogen isotope analysis has measured some individual Greenland sharks at trophic positions exceeding 7. Those measurements are drawn from the chemistry preserved within the shark's own tissues over many years of feeding. The values themselves are supported by evidence. What produced those values remains unresolved. The scale of what has yet to be explored is equally well established. More than 80% of the ocean floor remains unmapped in meaningful detail. An estimated 91% of marine species have not yet been formally described. Less than 1,000% of the deep ocean floor has been directly observed using human-occupied vehicles or remotely operated instruments. These figures describe not a temporary inconvenience, but the present boundaries of scientific knowledge. Other confirmed facts carry the same reminder. The colossal squid, the largest known invertebrate on Earth, existed within scientific literature for approximately 1 century before it was finally recorded alive within its natural habitat during the year 2025. During all those decades, knowledge of the species depended largely upon fragments recovered from predators or occasional specimens brought to the surface. The living animal remained almost entirely beyond observation. The Greenland shark presents another remarkable certainty paired with an enduring absence of evidence. Radiocarbon dating indicates that some individuals may live for approximately 4 centuries. Examinations of stomach contents have revealed whole seals and even remains attributed to polar bears. Yet, despite decades of research, no confirmed recording exists of a Greenland shark capturing large live prey in its natural environment. The predator is known. Its successful hunting behavior remains largely unseen. Beyond those established findings begins a landscape of unanswered questions. No confirmed living species has been identified as consistently occupying trophic level 7 within the modern ocean food web. No documented predator beyond the sperm whale has been verified hunting healthy adult colossal squid. Most of the organisms observed during extensive, deep Pacific surveys cannot yet be assigned to known species because they do not match the present catalog. Across the global network of underwater listening stations, unusual sounds continue to be detected. Many eventually receive convincing explanations, while others remain without confirmed sources. None of these unknowns represent failures of science. They are simply the current edge of observation, clearly acknowledged rather than concealed. Every confirmed statement rests upon evidence that can be examined, repeated, and challenged. Every unanswered question waits beyond that boundary, where future expeditions, improved instruments, and patient observation may eventually extend the map. Between those two territories lies most of the ocean itself, a realm where what has been learned is extraordinary and what remains beyond confirmation is even larger. A throne suggests permanence. It suggests that one place exists above every other, occupied by a single ruler whose position remains secure regardless of circumstance. That image has shaped the way food chains are often imagined, with each level rising toward one final predator that nothing else can challenge. On land, that picture serves as a useful approximation. Across the open ocean, it gradually dissolves beneath the weight of observation. The idea of an apex predator depends upon the assumption that one species consistently occupies the final position in every feeding relationship it enters. Such an animal would hunt without itself becoming prey, standing at the stable summit of a fixed ecological hierarchy. Within many terrestrial environments, that description approaches reality. Adult lions are not routinely hunted by larger predators. Wolves rarely encounter another species capable of regularly hunting healthy adults. The highest level of those ecosystems remains comparatively stable because movement is largely confined to a broad horizontal landscape that can be observed directly. The ocean follows a different geometry. Life unfolds throughout an immense three-dimensional volume where every direction remains open. Predation may arrive from ahead, behind, above, below, or from distances impossible to perceive until the final moments of an encounter. An animal that dominates the surrounding waters may still cross paths with something rising from greater depth, descending from brighter layers, or moving across pressure boundaries that few other species can traverse. Those pressure boundaries divide the sea into distinct physiological worlds. Each depth demands different adaptations for surviving crushing weight, limited food, changing temperatures, and the absence of sunlight. Many predators remain confined to the environments their bodies can tolerate. Within those regions, they may possess few natural enemies. Yet certain species routinely travel between neighboring layers, carrying hunting strategies into communities that evolved under entirely different conditions. Encounters become possible that would never occur inside a simpler and more uniform habitat. For that reason, trophic position becomes less a permanent property of a species than a description of a particular interaction occurring at a particular moment. The Greenland shark illustrates this remarkable flexibility. During one part of its long life, it may feed upon the remains of a whale resting across the abyssal plain. On another occasion, it may ambush a seal beneath Arctic ice. Chemical signatures preserved within its tissues indicate feeding histories spanning several trophic positions rather than a single, unchanging level. Depending upon circumstance, the same individual functions as scavenger, predator, or one of the highest consumers within its surrounding ecosystem. Every expansion of scientific observation has reinforced this pattern rather than weakening it. Deeper, remotely operated vehicles revealed communities beyond previous limits. Longer observation programs uncovered feeding relationships that short expeditions missed entirely. Nitrogen isotope analysis exposed trophic positions invisible through direct watching alone. Careful examination of stomach contents revealed unexpected connections, while simultaneously exposing the blind spots created by prey that leave no durable remains. Each new method broadened the network instead of simplifying it. The result is an ocean where boundaries continually shift as evidence accumulates. The highest documented predator today reflects the best information presently available, not the final structure of an ecosystem that has been completely explored. Every newly observed interaction alters the map a little further, extending pathways that once appeared to end. Perhaps the most accurate image is not a throne waiting at the summit of a ladder, but a moving horizon that retreats whenever the light reaches farther into the sea. Beyond that horizon waits another layer of relationships, another exchange of predator and prey, another reminder that the living ocean is defined less by fixed endings than by continual discovery. Its highest boundary has never remained still, because the ocean itself has never stopped revealing another depth beyond the last one examined. Imagine the ocean not as a story with heroes and rivals, but as an immense machine governed by the movement of energy. The pattern that has emerged throughout this journey is not a metaphor created to make nature seem mysterious. It is the consequence of physical rules acting across an environment so vast that familiar ecological models begin to lose their simplicity. The ocean behaves differently because the conditions controlling its food webs are fundamentally different. The classic energy pyramid provides a useful starting point. At each trophic level, only a small fraction of the energy consumed becomes available to the next consumer. Much of it is lost through movement, growth, respiration, reproduction, and countless other biological processes. In theory, that steady reduction should eventually produce a narrow summit where only a very small number of top predators can exist. The pyramid appears destined to end with a clearly defined apex sustained by the remaining energy. Across the ocean, the underlying mathematics remain true, yet the environment surrounding those calculations changes everything. Energy does not enter a single continuous chain before climbing toward one final predator. Instead, it arrives through multiple pathways spread across an enormous three-dimensional volume. Sunlight fuels photosynthesis within surface waters, creating the foundation for countless food webs. Far below, hydrothermal vent communities draw energy from chemical reactions powered by the Earth's internal heat rather than sunlight. Between those extremes, an unending descent of organic material delivers nourishment from the upper ocean toward the depths, supporting communities that never witness daylight. These different sources do not operate on identical timescales or within identical places. They overlap only occasionally, producing many neighboring food webs rather than one uninterrupted sequence. Each network develops according to the resources available within its surroundings, while remaining capable of exchanging energy with adjacent systems whenever animals travel between them. The mesopelagic zone illustrates this principle with remarkable clarity. Extending from approximately 200 meters, which is about 656 feet, to 1,000 meters, that is nearly 3,281 feet. It contains more living biomass than any other single layer of the global ocean. The sheer abundance of life allows numerous large predators to exist without exhausting the same food supply. Many may never encounter one another, despite occupying comparable trophic positions, because the available habitat is extraordinarily extensive. Daily vertical migration strengthens this arrangement even further. Animals feeding near the surface after darkness falls descend once daylight returns, transporting energy acquired within productive waters into regions where local production alone could never support such complex communities. Respiration, waste, and eventual death all transfer that captured energy deeper into the sea, reinforcing ecosystems that otherwise would remain far more limited. Other processes contribute over vastly different intervals. A whale descending to the abyss after death delivers an immense reserve of organic material concentrated within one location. That single event supports successive communities for years, sometimes decades, sustaining scavengers, bacteria, and predators through a chain of transformations unlike anything commonly observed on land. Hydrothermal vents continue supplying chemically derived energy regardless of changing seasons above, maintaining communities that function independently of sunlight while remaining connected to surrounding ecosystems through mobile predators. Viewed together, these mechanisms explain why the ocean resists a single terminal food chain. The challenge is not that the laws governing energy have failed. They continue operating with complete consistency. What changes is the scale upon which those laws unfold. Multiple energy sources, immense habitat volume, continuous vertical movement, and overlapping ecological networks combine to create a living system where several high trophic pathways can exist simultaneously without converging upon one permanent endpoint. The rule emerges not from symbolism, but from the mechanics of the sea itself. Darkness is often imagined as the absence of something, yet in the deep ocean it is an enduring physical condition that shapes every interaction within the food web. Long before forests spread across continents or large animals walked on land, the deepest waters had already settled into perpetual night. Complex life evolved while this immense realm remained beyond the reach of sunlight, allowing entire systems of hunting, escape, and survival to develop under conditions that have scarcely changed across immense stretches of geological time. On land, even the most successful predators exist within a world of constant exposure. Their movements leave tracks, their outlines can be seen across open ground, and their presence is recognized by prey, rivals, and eventually by human observers. Visibility creates natural limits because every creature shares access to much of the same information. A hunter cannot remain completely concealed forever, and an approaching threat often announces itself through sight long before direct contact occurs. The structure of terrestrial ecosystems is influenced as much by observation as by strength. Far below the surface, those assumptions lose their meaning. Vision becomes useful only across very short distances unless an organism creates its own illumination. Every flash of bioluminescence carries a cost because it also reveals the individual producing it. Many animals therefore depend upon different senses, interpreting pressure changes, chemical traces, electrical signals, or faint vibrations moving through the surrounding water. Information arrives in fragments rather than complete scenes, and every fragment fades quickly into the vastness around it. This fragmented awareness allows some predators to become remarkably difficult to detect. An animal that moves with exceptional patience creates only slight disturbances within the water. Cold temperatures slow the spread of chemical signals, reducing the distance across which another creature may recognize their presence. Regions with comparatively few bioluminescent organisms provide even fewer opportunities for accidental illumination. Instead of relying upon speed, these hunters succeed through restraint, blending into an environment where remaining unnoticed requires almost no effort at all. The Greenland shark embodies this unusual strategy. Swimming at approximately 0.3 meters per second, it advances with an almost imperceptible rhythm through waters hovering near the freezing point. Individuals have been documented descending to depths approaching 2,000 meters, where pressure is immense and sunlight has long since disappeared. Within that realm, The shark produces remarkably little acoustic or hydrodynamic disturbance, making it extraordinarily difficult for surrounding animals to distinguish from the background conditions of the sea itself until it has already arrived within striking distance. The same darkness that conceals one predator also conceals every other. No hunter possesses a complete picture of the surrounding ecosystem. A sperm whale sends powerful pulses of sound ahead, building detailed acoustic images from returning echoes, yet those images exist only where the sound travels and returns. Vast regions remain beyond immediate perception, including waters above, below, behind, or outside the path of each dive. The orca occupies a different portion of the ocean almost entirely, spending most of its life within comparatively shallow depths. Its world rarely overlaps with that of the Greenland shark, despite both belonging among the ocean's highest predators. Connections between these separate worlds depend upon animals that travel vertically through the water column, carrying energy, nutrients, and occasionally danger from one depth to another. Each traveler links environments that otherwise remain largely isolated, allowing food webs to overlap without fully merging. Predators occupying different layers may influence one another indirectly for years before sharing the same opportunity or the same prey. Within this immense expanse, darkness becomes more than scenery surrounding the food web. It functions as one of the mechanisms that allows the web to extend beyond familiar expectations. Information remains incomplete, encounters remain selective, and entire communities continue existing beyond the awareness of neighboring predators. The chain persists because the ocean is divided not only by depth and pressure, but also by what each living creature can never fully perceive. Imagine unfolding every chart, expedition log, and map ever produced of the deep ocean, then placing beside them the immense landscape that still lies beyond direct observation. The comparison is unexpectedly uneven. The explored portion occupies only the smallest fraction of the whole, while nearly everything else remains beyond the reach of cameras, vehicles, and human eyes. That imbalance is not an impression. It is the current scientific measurement of how little of the deep ocean floor has actually been witnessed. The figure is stated with remarkable restraint because it requires no embellishment. Less than 0.001% of the deep ocean floor has been directly observed through remotely operated vehicles, crude submersibles, or camera systems lowered into the depths. This estimate is used by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration as the most reliable calculation available from the accumulated record of exploration. It represents the combined work of generations of expeditions, yet it still describes only the smallest opening into an environment that covers much of the planet. Expressed another way, the directly observed area amounts to roughly 4,001 square kilometers, which is about 1,545 square miles. Beyond that narrow window stretches approximately 335 million square kilometers of deep ocean floor. That is nearly 208,161,000 miles of submerged terrain. The proportions are almost difficult to imagine. The explored portion resembles a single illuminated clearing surrounded by an expanse that continues far beyond the limits of ordinary perception. Every conclusion about the highest predators in the ocean has necessarily emerged from that limited sample. The animals most familiar to science inhabit places where observation is possible, near coastlines, within the sunlit surface waters, or along routes that research vessels can repeatedly reach. Even discoveries made in greater depths depend upon the relatively few locations where sophisticated equipment has been deployed. Every designation of an apex predator therefore carries an unspoken condition. It reflects the ocean that has been observed, rather than the ocean in its entirety. This perspective also explains why each revision described throughout this journey has followed the same direction. As instruments descended farther, remained underwater longer, and gathered more complete records, relationships once considered settled became more intricate. New predators appeared, overlooked interactions emerged, and familiar species occupied unexpected positions within the food web. None of those revisions required the previous observations to be false. They simply revealed that the sample had grown, allowing patterns hidden beyond its earlier boundary to become visible. The scale of what remains undescribed extends beyond landscapes into the living inhabitants themselves. During the decade-long census of marine life, involving thousands of researchers from dozens of nations and hundreds of expeditions, scientists concluded that the ocean likely contains between 700,000 and 1 million species. A substantial majority had not yet been formally documented. Every unnamed organism represents more than another entry in a catalog. Each carries its own relationships as hunter, prey, scavenger, competitor, or host, weaving additional pathways through a network already recognized as far more interconnected than earlier models suggested. Among those undiscovered animals will almost certainly be predators. Some may occupy familiar ecological roles with unfamiliar forms. Others may feed in ways that challenge present assumptions about how energy moves through the sea. Every newly described species has the potential to reshape surrounding connections, extending branches of the food web that were previously invisible simply because no one had encountered them before. Meanwhile, life continues according to the same rhythms that existed long before the first expedition crossed an ocean. Predators pursue prey regardless of observation. Scavengers gather where nourishment appears. Countless interactions unfold beneath immense pressures and enduring darkness. Independent of every chart, publication, or camera, human knowledge advances with each voyage, yet the ocean has never required an audience for its living systems to continue exactly as they always have. There is one participant in this story that has remained almost entirely outside the food web itself. It has watched from ships, descended inside research vehicles, lowered instruments into immense depths, and slowly assembled fragments into patterns. That participant is humanity, a species capable of observing the ocean's great predation system while existing largely beyond the ecological relationships that shaped it. This position is unusual, and it changes the way the ocean must be understood. Across most terrestrial ecosystems, human influence reaches every major predator. Whether through settlement, hunting, agriculture, roads, or noise, people alter landscapes in ways that reshape the behavior of animals living within them. Lions avoid expanding communities. Bears adjust their movements around campsites and towns. Wolves disappeared from vast portions of their historic range before later returning to some regions through conservation. Even where predators remain abundant, their decisions are often influenced by the presence of human beings. The deep ocean presents a profoundly different circumstance. Its oldest ecological relationships were established across spans of time measured not in centuries, but in hundreds of millions of years. Within those immense intervals, predators and prey adapted to one another without reference to anything resembling a human observer. Their senses, hunting strategies, and defensive behaviors were refined through encounters repeated across countless generations, long before the first ancestors of humanity appeared upon land. The sperm whale, offers one example of this ancient history. Its extraordinary system of echolocation allows it to construct detailed acoustic images of the world ahead, locating prey hidden within darkness at remarkable distances. Yet the sounds most strongly associated with danger are not those produced by engines or research equipment. The responses documented by scientists are directed toward the familiar vocalizations of orcas, predators whose interactions with sperm whales have unfolded over evolutionary timescales. The whale's attention remains focused upon relationships far older than humanity itself. The colossal squid tells a similar story through vision rather than sound. Possessing the largest known eyes of any living animal, it inhabits depths where every faint glimmer carries meaning. One leading explanation proposes that these enormous eyes are especially effective at recognizing the vast fields of disturbed bioluminescence created by a descending sperm whale. Such an adaptation did not arise because of modern exploration. It emerged through persistent encounters between hunter and hunted, repeated across ages that stretched far beyond recorded history. The Greenland shark reflects another version of this independence. Its measured movements, extraordinary longevity, and patient hunting behavior evolved within Arctic waters inhabited by seals, fishes, whales, and other northern species for immense spans of time. Its ecological relationships were established before human settlements expanded across the polar regions, and they continue according to rhythms that scarcely acknowledge occasional visits from research expeditions passing overhead. Viewed together, these examples reveal a striking perspective. Humanity possesses unmatched technological reach, capable of sending cameras into trenches, collecting genetic material from seawater, and interpreting isotope records preserved within living tissue. Yet these remarkable abilities do not place people at the center of the ocean's predation system. Observation is not the same as participation. The relationships governing survival beneath the surface continue whether human beings witness them or not. For a species accustomed to transforming nearly every environment it occupies, this realization carries unusual weight. Forests, grasslands, rivers, and coastlines all bear unmistakable signs of human influence. The deepest reaches of the ocean remain different. Their governing pressures originate from depth, temperature, pressure, darkness, and evolutionary histories extending across incomprehensible lengths of time. Those forces shaped sonar, immense eyes, patient ambush strategies, and migrations that began long before humanity existed. The ocean's great food web, therefore, does not revolve around the animal attempting to understand it. It remains organized around encounters between creatures whose histories are largely independent of our own, unfolding within vast regions that science has only begun to observe. The journey has carried us not toward certainty, but toward the edge of what can honestly be said. It began with a sound powerful enough to cross an immense stretch of the Pacific Ocean, detected by instruments listening beneath the surface for events no human ear could ever perceive. That sound emerged from darkness, echoing through water occupied by creatures whose lives unfold far beyond ordinary observation, including hunters equipped with eyes as large as basketballs, searching through a world where survival depends upon remaining unseen. From that first moment, each step upward through the food web revealed another revision waiting beyond it. The great white shark yielded its long-accepted position as observations accumulated, showing consistent avoidance of orcas. The sperm whale, master of extraordinary dives and unmatched echolocation, proved vulnerable to predators whose voices alone could alter its behavior. The colossal squid remained an animal known more from the stomachs of whales than from direct encounters in its own habitat, despite a full century passing between its scientific description and the first confirmed recording of a living individual in the wild. The Greenland shark appeared still farther along this path, drifting through Arctic waters at about 0.3 meters each second, occupying trophic positions that exceeded expectations built from earlier models. Each discovery reshaped the map rather than completing it. The highest position was never occupied permanently by a single species. Instead, every designation reflected the best evidence available within the portion of the ocean that science had managed to sample. As exploration expanded, those conclusions expanded with it. The pattern remained remarkably consistent because the observations themselves continued reaching farther than before. The answer hidden within that pattern is not the name of another predator waiting to replace the last one. It is the recognition that the terminal position in the chain lies beyond the limits of present observation. Every revision has been provisional because the sample has always been incomplete. Human beings have directly observed less than 0.001% of the deep ocean floor, an area representing only a minute fraction of the environment where these relationships unfold. Meanwhile, marine science continues describing approximately 2,000 new species each year, each addition contributing new connections to a network already more intricate than earlier generations imagined. Beyond the familiar coastline, the food web continues through trenches where snailfish survive beneath crushing pressure, feeding within ecosystems once considered impossible. It continues through immense water columns crossed each night by countless migrating animals carrying energy between depths. It continues around hydrothermal vents, nourished by the planet's internal heat rather than sunlight, supporting communities connected to the wider ocean only through gradual exchanges at their boundaries. These are not isolated curiosities. Together, they form overlapping systems that never pause simply because observation ends. The deep ocean is therefore not a distant realm separated from everyday life. It lies beneath the same waters covering roughly 71% of Earth's surface, beginning only 3 kilometers below the waves, that is nearly 2 miles, before descending into regions still scarcely explored. Its predator and prey relationships have unfolded continuously since long before humanity appeared, shaped by evolutionary pressures entirely independent of our presence. The final answer is therefore neither a shark, nor a whale, nor a squid, nor any other single creature. It is a place within the chain where evidence fades into unexplored water. There has always been a larger story beyond the latest conclusion because the ocean itself has never stopped revealing new layers. The chain does not end where knowledge ends. It continues beyond the reach of present observation, while the light of exploration gradually follows behind.